Hello, welcome to TrueHoop. With me, a fresh off vacation, Jarod Hector, and also fresh off vacation, Coach David Thorpe. How are you, sir?
I'm excited to be back at work, believe it or not. As much as I had fun on my time off, I love what I do. I love the sport we cover and the league we cover and the players and the coaches, and I'm really happy to be here.
And joining us, not fresh off vacation, as he told us this morning on our morning call, fresh off 70,000 hours of work,
Henry Abbott. Yeah, a little nuts. Going off the deep end. Yeah.
Henry is deep in the revision process of his forthcoming book, which, it's always, are you divorced now from the whole, the emotional part of it? You're like, all right, whatever they're telling me to do, I'm just doing whatever because I want to get this thing done. No more emotions about it, right? You're like, whatever, fuck it, I'm just in.
No, man, I'm so emotional. I really, honestly, I wanted to write a book because I've always felt like I've always had deadlines where you couldn't. Everything I've ever published, I'm like, man, with one more day, probably could have been the greatest thing I ever worked on. But you never have that one more day. The book is the one where you're like, no. We're going to the grave with this one, right? We're going to just make it perfect. And so this is literally that moment of just I'm just throwing everything I have at it. And it's going to my mother-in-law's already like, what are you going to do when this is done? We're going to have to take all this energy and redirect it. Going hard, Jarod. I'm going super hard on this one.
I like it, man. No, this is good stuff. We are all looking forward to the book, and there's so much we're going to get into today. Very excited to be back. NBA world, so much. But we finished last week's episode, or the week before we left, saying that we're going to start doing a little mailbag, and we want to tap into Coach Thorpe's big basketball brain. Henry and I are very lucky. We have any basketball questions? We don't need to. We just text David and call him like, hey, David, what about this thing? And he'll talk to us for.
I'm just going to write a fake email. TrueHoop@TrueHoop.com.
Ask questions that infuriate David. And when he comes out, he'll be like, okay, that's the stupidest question. And here's why. No, David won't say that.
It's a pretty good question. I like that
question. So we're going to have some listeners. We're going to read some of them and tap into David's big brain about what he thinks. So our first question, David, is from Michael. I'm not going to give any last names out because, So Michael is someone who's self-proclaimed, grew up loving 90s style basketball and post play. And he wants to know, is it possible for a back-to-the-basket guard like Nuggets rookie Jalen Pickett to succeed in today's NBA? And if you were working with him, what would your top 3 priorities be?
Yeah, I wouldn't call him a back-to-basket player, but he does play bully ball. Or I think he might even, I saw the letter. Did he say butt ball? Call it butt ball? Yeah. So it's bully ball. He does hammer guys down.
Well, you've never heard ball when you back your butt up into somebody.
Yeah. He just physically, he's a big, strong guy. He dominated college basketball at 23 years of age. Penn State is a football school. They had a great year. They have 2 players that got drafted. Seth Lundy is in the NBA too now. And but it is a unique game. And it's funny. I asked my son what he thought of, because Florida State didn't make the NCAA tournament this year, so Max was able to watch a lot of basketball at the end, and he did like Penn State a lot. And so he asked me, like, Dad, what do you think? Is he going to make it? I said, some guys they have no chance to be stars. Some guys are very likely to be stars. This guy is in an interesting spot, and you can look it up. Did he not sign? He broke Andrew Nembhard's record for biggest, second round deal. Mm-hmm. He may end up being a real star. He also may end up not making it. He's defensively, he's a big, strong looking guy. He's long and wide, so he can really physically beat up other guards. He's got an old man's game around the rim. He's just real patient. He's got that. Some good guys have the ability to just time up their finishes so expertly. He's one of those guys as a guard where he's just not in a rush. He can fake you with a shot fake. He can also eye fake you. So eye fakes you see in the perimeter all the time. Mm-hmm. Klay Thompson does not need a shot fake. Just as soon as he looks at the rim, oh boy, show shit, right? Well, some guys in the paint can do that too. Just by looking up, you react, and they know what they're doing. He's got that. How well does he shoot the ball is a big question. he shot well in college last year. We'll see what happens in the NBA. He needs to be able to be a three-point shooter. You can't do what he did in college in the NBA. He's not going to overwhelm many guys, and he can really pass it. He's a nice pick and roll player, but he's got to be a threat to score to be an effective pick and roll player. I think that's absolutely possible. Defensively, we really question it, but I don't know. Is it because he really did a bad job of staying connected to guards, like chasing over the top of screens? I didn't watch Summer League. I don't care what happened in Summer League for most of these guys. He did 15 workouts, I guarantee you. When you're a second-round pick, you're working out for anyone. So 15 workouts, like 25 days. So all those are, by the way, these aren't just back-to-backs. These are flying everywhere. It's not like a home game sometimes. It's all road games, Plus the combine, plus you probably had pro day. He's probably exhausted. But during the season, no excuse. So he did not do a great job of staying connected to guys. But it might be because he was so tired because he was the engine of their offense. Seth is a shooter. And then ball handling is always, he's got to work a three-point shot defending the ball. And he's got to be a very, very adept ball handler. He's on his way.
Kind of a lot.
So I was going to say.
No, there's three things. He asked for three things.
So those
but I mean, those are three.
Yeah. Those are three big things and a lot to learn, which he ain't going to learn all in rookie.
He's not a bad shooter, to be fair. Some of these guys are bad shooters. He's a work in progress, but he's starting off pretty high up.
Yeah.
So he's got a real shot there. Yeah, it's a great pick by them.
One of the things you say, David, is when you work with guys, especially a guy like Jalen Pickett, if you were to work with him, how do you get on the floor? So what is the one thing on a team that is defending an NBA title that's going to get him on the floor?
So, Jarod, I'm very proud of you. It's a fucking great question. It is, because it leads me to what I told my son. Second-round picks don't normally get a chance to prove their scores, and that's what he's best at. I mean, he averaged like 18, 7, and 7. He put up big numbers, 18, 7, and 6 in college. But in the NBA, his scoring is probably his best thing. Who's letting their second or third string point guard play bully ball? He's going to have to get a break. Jamal Murray's going to miss some games. I think Jamal can watch Jamal and learn, because Jamal doesn't beat you with craft, athleticism, but he beats you with craft and then just being bigger and stronger over the top of you as a scorer in the second box and from three. So he can be like Jamal, which I bet is what Calvin was thinking. Just like in NFL, I used to watch it. If you have a left-handed quarterback, you probably should have your second string guy be left-handed too. Everything's already used to that, This guy can play like Jamal. He isn't nearly as reputed as Jamal was coming out, but he does have a shot. Hell of a pick in the second round. Have a guy that might be an all-star or may not make it. At least he's got that kind of home run ceiling.
I like it. This is good stuff, guys. Very good question, Michael. We like that. All right, next question comes from, again, no last names, Matthew. And this is a player who we are all on this podcast high on and believe in a lot of basketball skills, but my God, is everything around him an enigma. What should Ben Simmons be working back to? Is it the same kind of player that he was before as All-NBA? And if not, what kind of skills or play style could he build back as he regains his strength and confidence? If Coach Thorpe was working with him in a role where he hadn't gotten injured and taken so much time off, what types of things would he be teaching? Now, before you answer, David, I know this. A lot of your answers are going to involve a ton of royal jelly, for sure.
Well, yeah, I haven't thought about it from that perspective. First of all, the question, if you're assuming he's never been injured, we can't assume that. He has been injured. So I'm happy to talk in science fiction if you want. I wrote about him. I was at ESPN then, but I wrote about him. He had Jason Kidd kind of Hall of Fame talent, and is 5 inches taller. And Jason Kidd learned to shoot the three, as you guys know, and couldn't when he was in college. I think now you probably should work Ben on being more towards like Draymond Green, and let him push the ball in transition, and then half court, let him be a half court guy. You screen
teammates, Just deck teammates.
Deck
I don't think that's going to be an issue for him. Yeah. But that would be, first of all, he could stand to get some of Draymond's competitiveness. That'd be nice. Honestly, to go back what you said, that's the most important thing. I'm not criticizing the question, but we're so far removed from thinking like that. We got to get him wanting to play basketball every day. and maybe he is, I have no idea, wanting to work every day, and also, most importantly, feeling like, oh, I can fail and I'm fine. Like basketball the failure is baked in, and he can't be sensitive to it. You just got to, the pitcher that gives up the home run in a playoff game and they lose the series and never recovers. That's where Ben is. Dude, you're gonna get smoked out for a million different things. You got to be okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be okay with it.
Yep.
And until you get there, nothing else really matters.
No, I think that's dead on. Yeah, this is so much of it is about the between the ears and like the right environment for him to just be comfortable and failing and all the love. All right, next question from subscriber named Rohit. What steps can Tyrese Halliburton take in his game to make a similar ascendancy towards burgeoning superstardom the way we've seen SGA and Ja in the past 2 years?
Well, I think Ja's superstardom is part because of the success of the team, and he's such a dynamic highlight reel. Shea is more the best driver in the league. The system works out great around him. I don't know that I would call him a super. He's all NBA, but he's not as well known. Tyrese has such a personality. The two things he's got to get better at, one is defense on the ball, especially. He doesn't have to carry the weight that he did last year. The team is improved. He's got a lot of talent around him. The Pacers are a very interesting core going forward with flexibility to move some guys. He's got to value that much more, I think. He can't be like Luka. He just doesn't have that size. Luka is not the worst defensive player in part because he's just so huge. Tyrese is 6'4", 6'5", and skinny, not that athletic. I love him. I'm a huge fan. He's a brilliant player, but he's got to really give more effort defensively. And then I think he's got to learn to play off the ball better. He is definitely less of a ball mover and more of an assist maker. And I think he'll be better served being more of a ball mover, not strictly, but more of it. He's got playmakers around him some, and then play off other people where he can score too. But he's a dynamic offensive player, like elite offensive player. So if he can learn to play off a little bit more, and I say learn to play off it, that means just be willing to let other guys grow the way you left Sacramento to come to Indiana to do that. If he can do that and then become just a Steph Curry level defensive player, he's all NBA level player.
Oh yeah. Well,
I think so.
Speaking of Tyrese, I did a little just quick check when I saw this question. Tyrese Halliburton, Donovan Mitchell, De'Aaron Fox. Do you know who graded out higher in advanced stats, especially estimated plus minus?
I think it was Tyrese.
It was.
Yeah, he was an all NBA level last year.
And he was ahead of Fox by a wide margin.
Yeah.
So that's just something interesting to note, right? Like, I think if you maybe ask the casual person who they like better, De'Aaron Fox or Tyrese Halliburton, they might say Fox, right? But it's like, that's not what the numbers bear out, right?
I mean, Tyrese is going to start for a dream team. Like, he's going to start for a Team USA team in the Olympics or something, or World Champion. He's a terrific, terrific player.
Very, very good. All right. This last question comes from Rich, and it's going to be for both Henry and David. And I have to say, Rich, when your question came in, Henry sends a text to me like, "Oh my God, I can't wait to talk about this."
Yeah, this is him. This is him.
No, it's part you because it's the other side of it. The other side of this, not debate, but like question. So Tim McMahon wrote an article, I want to say earlier this month, about biomechanics in shooting. And it's actually really interesting. So I encourage everybody to go read it. It was put out, July 21st. And there's a company that Overtime Elite uses called Breakaway Data. And there's 25 cameras all over this Overtime Elite gym. And it takes angles of every possible thing of when someone shoots a jump shot, right? And it's really, really important because it then spits out graphs and data and what you look like versus an average shooter versus an elite shooter, all this important stuff that really, first, if you don't really know what the data, how to break down the data and interpret it, that's probably problematic. But be that as it may, tons of information to then help a player become better at, in this case, shooting. Now, Henry, as someone who is not only writing a book about basically this very same subject, not shooting per se, but biomechanics, what do you think?
Well, okay. That story, interestingly, like I'm hungry for this, right? Like like there's absolute BS in data and there's magic in data. And I wanted like, oh, what are they? What's the takeaway? Like we didn't really get into it. I was bummed. I was like, no, like, what does the report say? Like, what are they saying to the shooter? Like, are we worried about like, it's going to be what? I don't even like your hips need to go back further or your arm doesn't extend enough. I don't know. There's going to be some lesson, right? And like I would just be very curious to know what breakaway data has learned about our bodies about and shooting and how maybe there are really cool lessons in there, in which case it's the coolest thing in the world. Maybe it's just a bunch of confusing mishmash, whatever. But what the article was rich on was just like interviewing Shane Battier about his emotions about biomechanical data.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, get the fuck out of here with that. Right. Like Shane Battier is like, oh, I didn't use this. I just like I was missing, and then I just aimed a little left. Like, and that's the fucking top of the mountain and thinking about shooting. Like, no, like I really felt like, all right, we used to navigate by stars, right? Yeah. And there would be a certain feel. Like, I hope all you coaches didn't use Google Maps today, because otherwise you lose your feel for the stars. like nobody is no one who's a practitioner of a thing has like warm emotions to their whole world being upended by technology. Like 100% of the time you say, I don't like it, because it threatens your whole career and existence, right? Like, so having the article organized around like, what are your emotions around this? Like,
not
like,
great.
It's just not a useful question, right? Like, and so I have no idea if it's useful or not. I do know a bit about breakaway data. They've done some stuff with P3, who I'm in the book about. Like, but you know, maybe it's great. I think it's probably more like, remember the early days of MapQuest? In my little analogy, like MapQuest was like, you know, like it was delays and often wrong, or the road's closed or whatever. Like, you know, it wasn't the right time to like reorient everything about how you get somewhere in those early MapQuest days, right? Like, eventually though,
Google Maps now so much better.
Right? Yeah, like there's a whole bunch of people now who can't drive anywhere without this tool, right? And so like I'm sure we're headed there on some schedule, but like this check-in is like, to me, like, well, it's I still don't know where we are. We haven't learned anything yet, right? Like
driving back from vacation from Martha's Vineyard, there is a 5-minute slowdown 12 miles ahead. Do you want to get off and go, yes, I do, and avoid that slowdown like that, right? But that's where we hope, and we believe it will eventually get there. I thought Shane said something interesting about breakaway data, which he is the CEO of.
No, Shane Battier is not the CEO of breakaway data.
No, I'm sorry.
Some Kevin.
Yeah, he's an investor in breakaway data. Excuse me.
Okay.
The mission is an exploration of if there is an optimal biomechanical profile to become an elite shooter. Now, David, as someone who works with people to turn them into, well, if they're good enough, elite shooters, how would you handle getting biomechanical data, and would it then impact the way you teach them how to shoot?
I look at it this way: if you were to build a robot that was the best shooter, you would be talking probably about arc. Again, a robot that moves, let's put it that way. A robot standing still can shoot it flat as hell and repeat it every time. Our game is very different than that, right? And so to me, arc, which is angle of entry, angle of exit leaving your finger pads, angle of entry going into the rim, how do we teach these players who have very different bodies? And it's not just about size. I mean, think about all the variables that we have from not just the length of fingers and the width of fingers, but the depth of fingers. Some guys have much fatter fingers, right? All of these things, and the way their wrists snap and the way their fingers go and all of that. And then that's just your hand. You have another hand, you have everything else. And so to me, it's always been art and science. The artist needs to help the player understand the science of how do we get that arc. So your hips, I call it stacking, head over neck, neck over torso, torso over hips, hips over knees. We really try to stack it up. So for example, when we do accelerate past the 3-point line, then race back an escape dribble to shoot the 3, which is something we do now, which we didn't ever used to do. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Tyrese, who's great at it. And we're getting faster and faster at doing it enough quickly. Well, you can't do it if your body's flying backwards and expect to make very much. You better get stacked. So you've got to be able to stop on a dime forwards, race backwards, stop on a dime, get that, I call like a spaceship. The old rocket ships that went straight up in the air perfectly. That's what we want to get right there. And then that's just your lower body. Now we got to get everything else. We work on head and neck angles. Can't get it too far back. The head's heavy, right? Your brain is sitting in fluid in your skull. If you snap your head back, that's not good. The vision center is in the back of your brain. That's laying the end of your rock hard skull. You know, when you get punched in a cartoon, you see stars. It's kind of, I've never been punched in the face, but my understanding is kind of like that because that vision center is pressing against the bone of your skull. All that shit matters. And so if you're telling me that, and I've never dealt with breakaway, but I've had many companies over the years, some of them are still in business, asked to do this for me and that for me. I'm an old man. I kind of know what I'm looking at. I can stand in the same spot in the same gym, and I can watch your arc. I can see the ball against the backdrop of the ceiling, and I can know where at the same spot, is he putting the arc I want? Is it a little less arc, right? I actually, in games, you'll laugh at this. And I've ever told Henry this before. So I can, because how do you show a player on two-dimensionally, because they're 500 miles away from me, their arc has changed. All I have to do is find a game where they're shooting against the backdrop of the crowd, and I can say, see that guy I swear to God, this is exactly what I do. Swear to Henry. This is what I do.
When you see this happen, you're like, David's brain is a special thing.
There's a dude wearing purple in the 5th row of the Chase Center, okay? And here's 3 games later, there's a woman in a yellow dress, same seat, and look how your ball is below her, but it was above him. Or I'll just compare it to Steph, who's the best shooter in the game. And great arc, best arc.
He knows what that lady in yellow dress is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I will send them, look, here's how you do it, right? But if someone could do this for me, beautiful. I love that. I think it's super helpful.
When I biomechanical data is very confusing. And when it's new, the data set is garbage, right? Like you just don't know anything. So like, I'm guessing that we're going to find like, you know, in the early, there's a little story from my book, which I don't think is a problem for me to tell. Okay. So they're working with NASCAR pit crews.
Oh, I know about this.
They noticed that
like, never told us
there's a job called the jack man, right? This is the person who like jacks up the car.
Yep.
And then basically the fastest pit crews had big jackmen. So they just started recruiting like giants. And it didn't work at all. And it was like, you know, it was a big mess, and it was years of kind of figuring it out. And like basically what they learned was that like there's sophisticated biomechanics of exactly how this works and how you recruit this person and what their musculature is like.
Wow.
But like a 6'2" jackman.
Wow, I didn't know this. This is
6'3",
cool.
6'4", like, and the data works like this, right? Like I'm pretty sure we're gonna find with the shooting thing, like they're talking about. I'm sure they're gonna talk about like the stacking David's talking about, and they're going to find the angle of your shin and whatever, all this stuff.
Right.
And they'll have like an optimal one, which is what they literally said. And that will be completely wrong for a whole bunch of players because they don't move that way, right? Like
you nailed it, Henry. You're
they're
exactly
going to have,
right.
But in 10 years, it might be like, hey, we find there tend to be like 7 types of successful shooters. Like now that might get a lot more interesting. So this is where the article to me, I'm like, where are we? Are we at the 1 or are we to get to the 7? If we get to the 7, that might be interesting.
That's such a genius comment. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this, that the tomato sauce story. Yeah. There isn't, it's not one tomato sauces. You should be looking for the best not tomato sauce. You should be looking for the best tomato sauces. Yeah. So I always say it's not about the best shooting forms. It's the best shooting forms based on your body. And remember, all these ligaments and tendons and bones are connected differently in us. Right. I've had players, we talk about the gooseneck. Have you ever heard of the gooseneck where your arm is straight up? Okay. I've had players that can't get the smooth elbow. If you're watching on video, you can see it. They can't do it. The way their bodies are connected, they can't do it for different reasons. Most of them, I'm dealing with men 25 and younger very often. They've not had serious injuries. My dad, when he bowled, had a severe hook with his left hand because he broke his ball and socket joint in a war game with the Citadel in 1959. So it was healed right.
Which ball and socket, shoulder or hip?
It was his elbow. It wasn't ball and socket. It was an elbow joint. It wasn't ball and socket. I don't think he understood what he did back then, but it just, he could never straighten it. So he had a nasty hook, which is pretty cool to see. So these players can't follow through fully. Doesn't mean they can't shoot.
There's so many different, a really dumb thing we could all do, which is like, if you stand face the wall, you're literally like toes against the wall and then bend and touch your knees to the wall. Okay. Now do it on one leg, let's say, and then step back a half inch. Like you're going to get a measurement of like, your heel will come off the floor at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as it starts to lift even a little bit, like now we know the angle you can comfortably bend your ankle at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
mm-hmm.
this varies wildly,
right?
Like there are NBA players who can do about 1 inch away from the wall, and there are people who can go like a foot or more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen some craziness, right? So that's just the first joint as you're shooting the ball, right? Like we're gonna have this wild variance in how it can travel, right? And like up we go the chain, like there's no way they're all gonna shoot the same. There's no way.
Well, just to pick up Henry's point, take it away from the shooting. Henry is the first one to really, I thought, talk about James Harden's breaking abilities, and now Luka's, right? Okay, well, what's the biomechanics behind that? Yeah. How can Luka?
Got a whole chapter on it, bro.
I know. This is my. I want to get it out in the public sphere so we can read it, because I teach breaking all the time, deceleration, sudden starts, sudden stops all the time. And so, what is it they're doing in terms of their biomechanics that allow, Luka's a big, tall dude, a high center of gravity. Mm-hmm. What is that happening so we can teach it? Yeah.
And you want to be breaking well, because otherwise you're breaking bad. Just kidding.
Henry, look at that. I can't bad jokes continue. No.
We can just erase that part, right?
No, that's definitely staying in for sure.
Hold on a second. You've had the ability to edit out stuff we've said all the time.
Listen, you see, Henry, look what you started now. Look what
you
started now.
Myself to be a fool every day? Come on,
we can't edit anything out. Nope,
wait, is this the real show, or are we just workshopping?
This is live to tape, my friends. No edits. No, I think this is all fascinating. And I think, again, to Henry's point, we need to embrace all this stuff, right? The idea that it's a tool in our massive Craftsman 4,000 piece toolkit, right? Like there's so many tools in the toolkit.
That's a really important point. I was talking a lot with my youngest brother, Ricky, who just got married. I was at his wedding down in Dominican. That's where we were. And he and I have been reading a lot about AI. He more than me, and listening to podcasts about it. I've been reading more. He's been listening more. It's going to threaten a lot of people's jobs. I ain't worried. And I don't care if it happened like tomorrow, because of what you guys just were saying. It's one thing to have the data. We still have to be able to instruct the human being.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that takes art. That takes a feel, and not just data. I just was talking to a college coach, guys, on a similar subject. Actually, almost the same subject, because it's data, but it's not biomechanic data. There's one head coach, I'm not supposed to say who it is, who every month, I love this, he meets with every player individually and goes through all of their data on the court and then works on solutions to the problem areas. Fascinating. A lot of coaches are afraid of that.
You're still heavy.
I think it's more, here's your 3-point shooting on your step back threes. Yeah. Here's your, okay. A lot of coaches are afraid to get into that because players can be fragile with bad news. But if it's routine and you do it in a way of how do we solve these problems, this coach is incredibly successful. And I just learned another reason why. It's very smart. But it's not easy to talk to players about this stuff.
But I mean, David, as a coach yourself and myself as a former coach, that's part of the gig.
I think so.
How do I communicate to my athlete what I need them to do and understanding how he or she can receive information, right?
Right.
Well, and the output's
you gotta know how to do that.
Like, biomechanical data is like medical research data, right? Like it's not really for us.
Right.
We're
right.
Shits, right? Like, but it should probably inform what your doctor says to you about whether it's a colonoscopy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way they're going to give it to you, as David says, is art. Right? It's going to be some. Like, there's like we are feeling creatures. There should be some feel to it, right? Like, and like Google Maps is like it was kind of a mess, right? But now it's like I kind of know, like in a feeling type way. I'm like I'm just looking for exit 32. Right, like it's a very very simple output, right? Like someone's gonna have to boil it down to cues that function in your brain in competition, or otherwise it's garbage, right? Like I don't think anyone's proposing that the world's going to become like cyborg like players running around with like massive, I mean, other than LeBron, like massive amounts of data in their head, right? Like mostly that's not how it goes. Right? It's going to be like, which thing do you focus on? That might be informed a little bit by the data like your doctor. You know, like it might be handy.
Is Google Maps better than Waze now?
Oh, we could use Waze as an example.
Yeah, I was just curious because we use Waze because Google Maps wasn't as good. I'm sure it's improved. And for those that are listening to AI stuff, it's going to get better in a hurry.
Yeah, they're investing a lot of capital.
Holy cow! And we're going to benefit from it.
Here's the Henry Abbott, Director of Transportation game plan. Here is like, if it's like a massive event where you want a lot of user input, so this would be like.
Yeah,
there's been torrential rain all over. Then I want every driver to inform me
right.
where I'm going. But I find the interfaces of Google Maps a little better. So if it's more just like traffic or routine stuff, Google Maps. then I prefer Google Maps just because
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Look at that, guys. Look at the information you're getting here on TrueHoop. You guys think it's just about basketball, but it ain't.
Wait, you guys, while you were gone, we got a tagline. Did you know this?
What's the tagline?
What's on exit? Just look for exit 32.
Somebody, someone not involving us. There was some conversation across Twitter about like, I'm tired of these few basketball pods. What else should I listen to? And then there was a little bit of actually, David was involved. David said something about our pod, right? And then there were a bunch of people kind of endorsing David's suggestion that this is an okay pod. And then some guys like 100%, like little red 100 underlines, like, top 3 basketball pod. So I'm like,
we're
top
new tagline. We're top 3.
You guys are listening to a top 3 basketball pod.
The TrueHoop basketball pod, a top 3 basketball pod. We'll be back after this brief commercial break. Yeah, what do you think of that, huh? All right, that's fascinating stuff. Okay, a couple things before we get to the main reason why Henry is on here. The NBA sent a memo to all 30 teams over the weekend or Friday. Friday news dumps, classic move. And as well as in the business, Friday news dumps basically when you send stuff out like after everybody, because Friday most people are checked out by 2:00. They're not really paid. They're like counting down. When can I leave? And you let something go, big news that you don't want to get talked about. You let it out around 4 or 5, then it's like, oh shit, whatever, the weekend, whatever. And by Monday, everybody forgets. But not here.
Newsroom calls the big name journalist, and they're like, "Hey, this thing." They're like,
I'm on vacation, bro. I'm already 2 martinis in
right now.
No time for that. But the NBA sent a memo to all 30 teams. And Chris Haynes was the first to report it, talking about the Damian Lillard trade request to the Miami Heat. And basically, I'm going to paraphrase, but the NBA basically said that to Aaron Goodwin, who is Dame's agent, it was reported that he was telling other teams besides the Miami Heat that if you trade for Dame, you're going to have an unhappy superstar on your hands. And that is the last thing any NBA franchise wants, is an unhappy superstar who is not going to play for your team and make life generally miserable. See James Harden, see who else did it that was super unhappy? I mean, Anthony Davis kind of, sort of, but like
Anthony Davis in New Orleans, yeah. That's all folks t-shirt.
I was actually, it was funny. He came, he was in Brooklyn at the time, and I'm like, this is wild. Okay, anyway. So nobody wants to deal with that, supposedly, right? So the NBA interviewed all the teams, and they said, well, I don't know what Aaron and Dame's been telling you, but they told us that if we trade for him, that he is not going to play for us, and we're going to be very unhappy and all that. And Aaron and Dame were like, no, we never said that. Listen, we know he said that. Everyone knows he said that because
some of it's public, yeah.
That is also a superstar who's under contract's owning leverage. What else can they possibly say? I have 4, Davis, whatever. However many years you have left, I have to play if I want to get paid. I can do nothing else, right? There's no other way I can hold leverage over you other than saying I'm not going to play for you if you trade for me. Okay. So the NBA said, Aaron, don't say that anymore. Henry, when you saw all the news, what did you think?
I thought it was a big deal. 2 years ago, I asked Aaron what Dame's leverage was. He was a very much under contract star, and I was like, how, they were anticipating, considering, depending who you believe, commanding a trade at that time. And there was a lot of tension, power play with the team. And, they, I guess, tried to use that leverage to get them to upgrade the roster on Portland. And I was like, what is his leverage? Like, he's just going to have to go play to make his money. Right. And Aaron's a colorful guy. Right. And he's like, are you fucking kidding me? You really don't know? And I'm like, go ahead and explain it to me. Right. And, there's this James Harden plan, right? James Harden that was doing it like that time. basically it's like, I'm not really feeling the Rockets anymore, so I'm going to be partying on video elsewhere during training camp, and you're probably going to trade me. And so it still was confusing to me. I know this is going back to like the earliest days of free agency. There's a giant, the big, like the Titanic versus iceberg of power play in the NBA is like the owners want to control who plays where. They want to own the players, right? And then free agency introduces, obviously, the moment of free agency, you get to pick where you go. But what about a year before, right? LeBron signed a series of 1-year deal, and he just kept being able to tell the team who he wanted on the team, because if not, then in a few months he would leave, right? And it happened multiple times. It happened. So then, like the Anthony Davis story, kind of in New Orleans, was a little bit of like, well, what about 18 months out? What about 2 years out? Like how far out does it extend? Maybe you could sign your superstar contract and the next day start using your leverage, right? Like this is the kind of stuff that GMs and smart people really do sweat behind the scenes, is like, where do we stand on this superstar power thing? And and so the thread is to not play. Like that's the James Harden model, and that's what Aaron Goodwin explained to me in great detail, and specific details of like this front office that might want to trade for Dame. Like every single one of them is going to lose their job before he ever suits up there, right? Like somewhere in there, apparently the NBA has told us we're crossing a line with the CBA, right? Those rules have never been well articulated in the public anyway. Right. But if you take that off the table, if it's really the case, if the league's really going to saying very clearly, like this is not how we're going to be able to negotiate, like I think Joe Conan's hand just got way stronger, because it's the only card Aaron Goodwin has to play, right? Is like, so really now you're like, you can't trade him to the Magic if you're Joe Cronin. Like then the NBA is saying, they're taking the billionaire side. They always do. But like, no, Dame, like you signed a deal. You already give away all those.
Yes. Rights, and this is where we are ultimately with this, right? And I want to be clear, and people who listen to this pod, a top 3 basketball podcast, by the way, should know this. We, especially me, I am as pro player as they come. I am the billionaires. I'm out here rooting for billionaires. However, if you are under contract for 4 years, which Damian Lillard is, I just pulled it up, 4 years. Look, man, you took the money. Like, so if you want to get the money, you have to play. Now, as David always says, and I'm in agreement with this, as an organization, if I feel like you've done right by me, I want to do right by you as well and work my best to get you facilitated to somewhere you want to go. I don't want to trade you to Siberia, although as David likes to say, there are no teams in Siberia. Oh. Point being, I'm not going to trade you to like, the freaking Orlando Magic or the Pistons, right? Somewhere, some horrible place you don't want to go. But as a GM, it is my job to do what is best for the organization that currently employs me. Not what I already did what was best for you. I gave you 2 more years and then you have 4 total, right? I did what's best for you. Now to keep my job, I got to do what's best for me. So look, if it's Miami that ultimately has the best deal, which I don't think it is, fine. Or as David, you said, maybe we'll get a 3rd or 4th team involved. And if they want to get you to Miami through that, then that's on them. But we are going to get back whatever is in the best position for us. And I think that's a perfectly fair and reasonable position for the Portland Trail Blazers to take.
Well, it used to be players would request a trade. And then it's been, I'm requesting a trade. AD did this and claimed there were maybe 3-4 teams. So now we're at, okay, now it's just 1 team. So what's next? I want to go to Miami, but not until winter. Like, you know what I mean?
Ooh,
like,
yeah,
I understand the motivation behind it. And I understand why Dame wants to go to Miami to begin with. But listen, this is the game. We talk about science and art. This is art too. This is the game that exists. The nuance, the gray matter, the gray area of managing a team, managing a player, in Aaron Goodwin's case, and the player. Of the team wants to make sure they retain the asset. Why do you do it? So that you can make your fans happy. Henry has talked a lot and written a lot about what Dame means to Portland. And then also, what do we get from it? He's our asset now. He can't go play for someone else without us being compensated, as opposed to losing him for agency. So they did that. Now they're allowed to get some reward for this, because they took a risk. The risk being, we paid him all this money. If we can't get much return, it's a huge flop for us. And so they're allowed to, he's coming off an amazing season. To limit them to just one team, because that's what you want, isn't really how the game should be played. You should be a little more open. I understand why Dame isn't, but we always say, well, this is, we all play games, whether it's a board game or whatever. There's an understanding. It's just like when you're driving. We have an agreement. Let's use our indicator, please. Right? There's certain ways we can work together on this. They've got to do a better job collectively of playing in the sandbox the better way so that both parties can be happy.
And Aaron's an unbelievable negotiator. Like
he's a great agent.
If we wanted a deal for this podcast, like I would love for Aaron to represent us in that. We would get 10 times the money of other agents, right? Like, but I think his particular, and I say this as like a fan and kind of a friend, someone's known him for a long time. Like, but I do think that he has a particular forte, which is money.
He did that.
Dame's NBA income is near record-setting all time. His off-court income is near record-setting all time. He's literally one of the highest-earning players in the history of all sports. And one of the biggest paydays he got was last summer. So like this, and this is a little bit fucked up. Like 2 summers ago, we knew he was not satisfied with the Blazers' direction. Then with the Blazers, they had Neil Shea gone and Jody Allen, an unstable kind of leader, and they just needed to like lock into like, everyone needed to look stable. So they all just threw in on this bullshit extension, which was a mistake for both parties, right? That is the day that Dame lost the ability to say, I can only go to Miami. Correct. Maybe it would have worked, right? He had a much stronger poker hand, closer to free agency and with lower salary, right?
4 years left, my guy. Come on.
You got the money first, and now it's like it's just not. You're not that in the pole, not that much in the pole position.
And let's also remember he's in his mid-30s. Like, you're.
He was a good. I mean, he was a top. He was the top offensive player.
Yes, you can argue he was the best offensive player in the league last year.
Right,
aging pretty well so far, but
so far.
Yeah.
But I have thoughts about small guards and how they aged. History is not kind to them, generally speaking. Dame's career, when it's all said and done, unless he signs another contract, as of right now, $449 million in just NBA earnings. I don't mean endorsements. I mean on the court playing basketball. Only $500 million, guys. Like,
right. So if we gave up, if he gave up the assurance of that last, however much, I forget, but approaching 200 million. But if he was like betting on himself, then he would be, I would argue, have tons of say over his next team and probably win a championship. But instead, he got the money, and so now he might spend those years in Orlando. It really could happen now,
for sure.
It's like that. I think the difference between optimal earning and pretty good earning changes nothing about your lifestyle at this level.
Well,
right, like nothing at all. Same yacht. Same number of family members joining you on that.
If you want to get it, this is like I do all the time, right? Like, it's how much does your life get materially affected once you reach a certain amount of money, right? When Jeff Bezos filed for divorce from Mackenzie, it was all settled, and literally she took half of his net worth. My man went out. No, not my man, because he's not my man, but you know what I'm saying. He went out literally the next day and bought a $500 million super yacht. Why? Because at that level, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like, it's not going to change your day-to-day material life in any possible way. What you can do at 50 million, you can also do at 25 billion, right? It's so same for Dame, right? 300 million versus it's the same versus 500. Like, nothing, your day-to-day, same. So you opted for the bird in hand, and listen, there's something to be said about bird in hand. I understand.
But then you have a bird. You can't use that hand for something else. Like, you're holding a bird. Yeah.
Correct.
You can't go play tennis right then. Yeah. Here they are in a tennis game, swinging a bird around. Yeah.
I love it. Analogies. This is why we're here. One story, guys.
That was a little weird. But
no, it's good. But we knew where you were going with that. It's been a rough off season for Pelicans forward Zion Williamson. His family and he are now the subject of a lawsuit for a loan, $1.8 million in total money that they did not repay to a California tech company. According to the Associated Press, Zion's stepfather was acting as his business agent in this deal and told the California tech company that Zion would not enter into any marketing relationship with them, and that was the reason for the connection in the first place. They wanted to work some marketing deals for him, hope that Zion would become a spokesperson for them eventually. But he being Giant's stepfather, needed a bridge loan to cover investments and some other obligations that the family had. And they were not going to be able to make it unless they got this bridge loan from the company. And if they didn't get the bridge loan, Zion's not going to work for you. It's like, so the company says, all right, we'll give you the loan. Here are the terms and conditions. We got to get paid back by a certain date. Here's when we start to do whatever. And one payment was made, another check bounced. Like, it just seems all fishy. And I say all that to say, you know, given what's going on with him and Mariah Mills, and, you know, you guys could look that up. We don't need to get into the details here about all that. His beginning of his basketball career hasn't gone as well as he probably would have liked. And I think now is the time. I don't know how much control or influence his stepfather and his mother have in his life, but now as a 23-year-old man, like, dude, this is your career and your life now. You got to be the dude who's in charge, and you make the decisions and or get people around you who have a vision and a goal that you have made together and set, and you guys work in conjunction to do this, because all of this stuff cannot make it good for you to do what you want to do best, which is be productive and healthy and play basketball.
Henry?
I'm looking at David. Honestly, I follow this like this is just a sign of like every now and again we get a little peek into like how stupid basketball is behind the scenes. Like, these are all just people being jerks, not
Pretty
like
much.
criminals, but just jerks. Just
jerks.
like I'm gonna need some money, and yeah, and they're like, oh yeah, like, and it's all just shady, right? It's not, and this is true at the highest levels, right? Like, and it makes it look to me like Zion's a tragic figure or something. Like everything's going wrong all around him. But like as I was saying in our little pre-call, like if this man were healthy right now, then
he'd be fine. No one care.
Like you dig around not any player, but
most players.
Certainly Michael Jeffrey Jordan like has this kind of stuff just all around, and we just didn't. Everyone just didn't talk about it because it was like he's Michael Jordan. Like, and if Zion were shooting 70% and hammer dunking over everybody, like this is nothing. It's not. It's a sign that the league is pretty stupid behind the scenes, like the way it all happens. Like bridge loan to the stepdad.
It's true.
Like exactly the kind of thing
that happens.
There's a lot of bridge loans to a lot of stepdads out there.
Yeah, a lot. David, and actually you too, Henry, as parents of athletes, even though
are we getting bridge loans?
No.
Oh.
Even though none of your kids are gonna play pro sports, when is the time for a young man or young woman to take control of their career and axe away, mom and dad? Like, look, listen, I can help you and do whatever. But decision making, like, I gotta be the one doing this stuff, man. This is my life.
It varies, of course, on the particular player. Ideally, they're already starting that process. Henry and I speak all the time about our kids who are, I think Molly's not yet 20, and my kids just turned 22. But I mean, they're years in the process of you guys figure this out. I mean, starting when we let them get smartphones in 6th grade because the school they went to asked for it. We told them, we're done doing your social calendar. You just have to get our approval. That's all. But you're in charge of all of it. And then come to us and we'll say yes or no. It just goes from there. You cooking your own food and whatever. There is an issue. There are players who have this. Zion's not alone in this. And it's not unique to sports either, for that matter. Mm-hmm. But the answer to your question, Jarod, that you asked is he's of that age, right? It's no longer debatable. He's responsible for everything.
But and I don't know about Zion, but like to me, like this NBA world is a very extreme one, and so like David and I are parents of children, and we're primarily first of all, we're stable, we're in a stable environment.
It's like,
just lucky.
No, for sure. Yeah.
And so we're saying, well, we're good. We just want you to go be a good adult, right? That's a luxury that we get to be in that position. But like a lot of people who make the NBA come from like
non-stable situations.
Well, and just like here's a 6-year-old, and the moms at practice saying like everything you guys say is stupid. We're betting everything we have, all of our free time, all of our free money, all of everything on that kid supporting all of us one day. And then they put in 15 years of work, and then they get to the draft, and like they're not there to emancipate this kid. They're not there to be. They're there because like, hey, now it's time. We have
gravy train.
This is our project, right? Like this is, and there's just so many. Like it just works very strangely. Like there's a lot of, I don't know. I spent forever on the phone with an agent who was like just fired up about a very good NBA player who ended up having like mental health issues and having kind of a disappointing career. Really, and he this agent, I never really could get the story like well established, but like basically the player's mom just took over like everything. He couldn't even really have a girlfriend. He couldn't and he just kind of like retreated into this kind of sad, he would just get more and more tattoos, was like his kind of like way of processing this. Like his mom just like, and like there's eventually he moved into a gated community and like then asked the security not to let the mom in. And then she would like chase in other cars and like show up in the middle of his party or whatever. And like, it's just like, anyway, I don't think it's healthy to want to make your living from your kid.
No, definitely not.
Nevertheless, that's where a lot of the NBA is, and like it creates a lot of problems, right? It's just because you don't want to. The last thing you want is the kid to stand on his own 2 feet. That would be the worst possible thing.
Yeah.
So then you have to infantilize them, right? You have to force them to rely on you. Like, whoops.
Yeah, creates a lot of issues. Well, let's just hope Zion, is healthy first and foremost this coming season, and things can start changing around him. All right, so we're on vacation last week, and I made it a point not to check any screens, and it was great, but I had my phone out and I see a Substack alert, and I'm like, what? And I see Henry Abbott, TrueHoop, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Sudden cardiac arrest is a basketball problem, and I see Bronny James, and I'm like, well, I can't not read it now. So I just
wanted you to re-up your subscription.
So I read and I deep dive. And Henry, I mean, look, and it's not just because you're here, but what a tremendous piece. We're going to dive into it just so background everybody knows. Last week, Bronny James, LeBron's son, freshman at USC, was I think on having practice, right? Some kind of basketball-related activity, and had sudden cardiac arrest and collapsed on the court. Of course, he was rushed to the hospital. As far as I know, a couple days later, LeBron released a video, Bronny playing piano with the family, hanging out. I think everything seems fine, and he's okay, at least as much as whatever they told. Who knows what a cardiologist discovered when that part is not out, and really it's none of our business. So whatever happens there, hopefully LeBron and Bronny and everybody's doing the right thing for him going forward athletically. But Henry said, look, this is a problem, by the way, guys. Healthy young children collapsing, especially in sports, but in basketball particularly, is a huge problem. And one of the ways we know that leads to it, and again, I want to be very clear, we are not saying anything about Bronny James at all. But one of the ways we know that the things that lead to cardiac arrest in otherwise seemingly healthy young athletes is the use of performing-enhancing drugs. And Henry took us on a tour de force through his piece, 7,000 words. I don't know, it was a lot. It was really, really good stuff. So first, Henry, awesome piece. But
so while you're reading it, like everyone on vacation is like, "Are you ready to play cornhole yet?" Or what? Like,
it was like, "Come on, we gotta go play battle tennis." I'm like, "Dude, you don't understand. This is like gonna blow your mind." I'm sending them all, and by the way, it was free to everybody. I'm like, "No, it's free. Here, go read this thing. It's so good." Wow. So yes, the Bronny thing happened, but I know that doping in sports is something that concerns you deep to your core, at just in general, regardless of what happened.
It has for a long time.
So walk me through the process of, all right, I'm doing it now. Now's the time to write this piece.
Yeah. So just to be super clear about Bronny, like there are kind of half lies, half truths, like whispers about almost every professional athlete. Like they took somebody's spot, and then somebody's parent is jealous and is like, "Oh, that kid's doping," right? Like, so like I've heard crap about so many athletes. Bronny happens to be someone I've never heard one suggestion about. Not that I would, but just I can tell you, like I've literally never heard one thing about that guy doping, which is like, so that's not the point at all. The point is, like, I feel personally more than a decade into like just we need to focus more on health in this sport, right? And this happened to be the week. Last week ended up being the week that every major publication has a big examination interviewing doctors of like what causes this sudden cardiac arrest in athletes, right? Like everybody, we had our moment to like examine this thing. 5 years ago or ish, I was an editor, and was Jackie McMullen wrote this incredible series about like just how many NBA players die young. She talked to all there's this Larry Bird thing where he says, he tells his wife all the time, he said she hates to hear it, but like most of us big guys don't seem to last too long. And at the moment she was writing that, Caleb Swanigan, Fab Mello, those guys were in their mid-20s. Robert Tractor Trailer, Will Chamberlain, Pistol Pete, Moses Malone, Jerome Kersey, Kevin Duckworth, Cliff Robinson, like all, take any year in NBA history, like those press releases that the NBA sends out, like the form's already made. They just get one more quote from Adam Silver, like another guy died. Like it happens all the time. And this is of course all sort of subservient to Hank Gathers, Reggie Lewis, Len Bias, like all these stories, right? Like, and it maybe feels like we're just a little hysterical in this sport because we had celebrity players die young, but there's a big, I spent some of last week reading the medical journal Circulation, which is actually like that name kind of cracks me up because it's like, sounds like the library to me more than like, anyway, but yeah, so a black male Division I basketball player has a 1 in 3,000-ish chance of sudden cardiac arrest. A football player 1 in 40,000, a cross country runner 1 in 60,000. Like, it's not a case of the Hank Gather story or Len Bias story getting in our heads. This is like really different in this sport. And then what really kind of got under my skin was like people are exploring this issue with doctors and quotes and research, and everyone's ignoring the thing the NBA would like them to ignore, which is another article in Circulation points out that the mortality rate of athletes using banned analgesic anabolic steroids is 6 to 20 times higher than non-users. So 600 to 2,000% increase in death if you use this one known risk factor of anabolic steroids. That's from this. I really recommend. There's this article from 2015 by Andre Lagersh and Maria Brosnan. Now they kind of roll through, like, all right, so that's just one PED, right? Or one group of PEDs. EPO. There's pretty good evidence. They kind of roll through. They're not like exactly pointing the finger. They're just saying, look, there's EPO in these studies leads to evidence of enlarged hearts. And there are these stories of blood being too thick to circulate, like cyclists literally dying in their sleep. HGH, there's a study that associates it with cardiac failure. Testosterone comes with, the FDA has like the testosterone warning about heart attacks and heart failure as known adverse outcomes. And then there's a note that also like the amount of difficult and high intensity exercise these drugs permit you to do, that alone could cause sudden cardiac failure.
For sure.
And then also like unresearched, but definitely real, is these things in combination, which is not studied, but probably worse. And if you go and read the stories of dopers, they always do in combination. Right? That's how it's generally recommended by shady doctors. So, we live in this kind of world where like it feels like we are making a show this week of player safety concerns, but we're ignoring I don't know what the factors are that lead to young players collapsing, but I know that if you're examining it and not including this in the examination, it's not a particularly robust examination, right? I'm like, we got to talk about this one, and don't give me this horse crap about the testing so good that the players wouldn't do it. Like, that is 100% categorically, provably, demonstrably stupid. Like, and we can talk more about that if you want, but yeah, the testing's BS. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think WADA, or which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, I think said about the NBA's testing, it's like, this is woefully behind. Like, even what like most countries are doing, and most countries are not even that. They're also like not testing for everything. So if the NBA is behind that level, that's not great. Part of this, though, Henry, is we all, and I'm using the royal we here, with sports, we enter into an agreement, right? And the agreement is we see these amazing feats of athletic prowess, and we just say, wow, these people are superhuman, and that's why they are, not like us mere mortals, and it's all part of the mythologizing. But if we're really honest with ourselves, and we look and we're like, but this doesn't make sense. Right? Like no one, and I'm not going to name any names, no one at the end of a 6-hour tennis match should be getting stronger and faster. Like, any kind of activity that you're doing, you get tired and weaker. That's how physiology works. But why is somebody all of a sudden maintaining their level or able to? Well, they found that extra gear. Did they? Like, how did they find that extra gear? And all the little like words that we use to like code it, and because this is all about narratives and storytelling, right? We and the story is better when this person overcomes with their amazing versus, well, it's actually science, and here's what happens. You take EPO allows you to work out longer. That right, no one wants to hear that. Right. That's a boring story.
What you're saying is the extra gear comes in a bottle.
Yes, often, yes. It's right. Yeah. It's not possible.
Yeah, I mean, in these situations, yeah.
And so, how much of it is on, and not you, because you obviously talk about it, is on us to like shatter the myth and be like, guys. And then if we shatter the myth, can we still enjoy our sports?
I mean, I just think that's a sad state of media where they're just kind of like omerta, right? Like this is in cycling, we had this thing where it's like, just everyone, if you talk about it, I mean, Lance Armstrong, super doped up, we now know, right? Mm-hmm. Like sat on the dais and like pointed fingers at the French journalists who were 100% dead on, doing really good journalism. And he picked a fight with them. He was like, do you believe he was the victim, right? He was a victim for like, I don't know how many, more than a decade. And they made this, honestly, one of the best commercials I've ever seen was this Nike ad for Lance, which is you guys want to know, like, it's like he's getting his bike out of the garage and going out in the rainstorm, putting his little jacket on and just like hammering through the hills, right? And he's like, you guys want to know what I'm on? Like, I'm on my bike, right? Like he was like, it's so fucking good, but it was total fraud, right? Yeah. He just, and like all these people, there's this there's a million victims of Lance Armstrong, right? Yeah. But he there's like people who worked for his team who like heard conversations, or there's like when he was in the hospital with cancer, one of his teammates' wives heard him telling the doctor all the things he was taking, and she later told authorities that, and he destroyed her life. Like, just terrible, like super aggressive things, right? And like that mentality that he had to go after, he was at war with everyone. Mm-hmm. That is very much fueled by these drugs, mm-hmm. right? Like that warlike mentality is part of what you get out of this, right? This is like testosterone's a war drug, right? Yeah. And I feel like that's like, we love that in our athletes, right? Mm-hmm. This is not so different from like exactly the way we describe the mentality of the killer or the whatever, right? Like, I think we should be careful with that, right? Like, I think we really like to see, the best compete against each other. And that doesn't have to be at 20% more than they could do clean. It's still fun to watch if they're clean. They just need to be like, we just need to have the rules be clear. And I would love it if it could be uninvasive and they could, I don't even mind them knowing some chemists or doctors or whatever, right? Like, but the fact is, you have to test the living shit out of them and know everything they're taking, or you put the onus on them to go find the cutting edge of this, which means they're like this Tour de France rider who I've met, Tyler Hamilton, who literally got a bag of blood in the middle of Tour de France. It was a bad bag, and he's peeing black. And all night he thought he was going to die. And, he got it from his doping doctor, who we met like originally in like a roadside truck stop, outside Madrid, right? And because of this moment and what he's done and how he's compromised his career on the line, like he can't even go to the hospital, right? He's one of the best athletes in the world in the middle of the Tour de France, and he's just infused potentially a bag of the wrong blood type. Like, he thinks he's probably a good bet to die, but he's not even going to go seek medical help. Like, what an egregious position for the sport to put the athlete in, right? Yeah. Like, this is the cost of you not testing the shit out of everybody, as is players collapsing a basketball on the basketball court, right? Is like, we're elevating the likelihood of this because you guys don't test well. And on top of that, every big name journalist in our sport is omerta. Yeah. Like, not one word from anyone. And like, I got, I wrote about 11 years ago when this Lance thing happened, and like they legitimately like singled me out as like this fucker, and kind of like just, and every they did it, they made an example of me, right? Like, because I wrote about this thing. And I think not just because of me, but because of like the general understanding, the sort of gentleman's agreement around the league. Like, journalists just don't. This is one of the topics. There are others too, but like, you're a troublemaker if you go down this road.
Yeah, we're not going there. On the David, as an athlete, someone who coaches athletes and works with them, you understand why athletes get pushed this way, right? And I'm not saying you know any information about it. What I'm saying is your entire career is traded on your physical body. That is how, if you're an athlete, you make your money. Well, if the guys I'm competing against all of a sudden somehow seem that they're way better than me and all these, it's like, well, how is that possible? Then you're like, oh, they're all on the stuff. Well, fuck it. If I want to make money, I got to get on the stuff too, right? Like, so you can see how people's minds go there because this is how I make my living.
Obviously. Yeah. I was talking to a college coach last night, really late, getting ready for a revisit from one of the best players in the country. And this college coach is a hardworking person, and he has tracked this guy, his data, for months, and his numbers are getting worse and worse. He's an amazing player. He's a teenager, but he's exhausted because the schedule of all the things you do, culminating in the July period in AAU, they're not Olympic athletes peaking at the right time. They're overwrought with games. And so for this young man, if he were to speak to the wrong person, who could say, you know what, you won't get tired next summer if you just do this, this, and this, and it's legal, or we can get around it, whatever. I've never had, because I'm not an expert on that. I've never seen it. I've always told players don't even do creatine, which was back in the day something they did a lot. I'm sure it's still done to this day a lot, but no one that I deal with does it. And I told my son, who weighs 178 pounds at 6'3", and that's pretty much where he started 3 years ago, more or less. We don't mess with it. Don't mess with any of that stuff. But of course, what Henry and you were saying, I understand. They feel like I got to do it to keep up with the Joneses. It's an issue. I really love to echo. I like to echo Henry's point of the league and the people covering the league. I just have to do their job better, and so that the athletes I deal with are safer. It's really simple as that.
Here.
It's sad that they won't do it.
Yeah, there's a weird thing to me there are clean people in basketball, tons of them, right?
For sure,
but they don't brag about it.
Right.
It's very strange to me. There's a calculation. And I've been to these, let's say your agency has a dinner or a brunch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're on a team of people where like, maybe it's that team that doesn't work. Maybe it's your NBA team. Maybe it's the NBA. Like, maybe it's your coach. But it's not cool. Like, it's 100% the calculation of all the clean athletes in the NBA that it would not be useful to brag about being clean.
Right.
Like, it's very strange to me. In running, there's like tons of people who brag about it, and they
but Henry, I think that connects to your original point, which is it's so below the surface that they don't even think to complain about it because no one's making an issue. I think if there were 50 Henry Abbotts hammering this stuff, I think we would see a lot more of, hey, I'm clean, and I know some people that aren't, but I am. It's under the carpet.
I published this story whatever day, and now
right.
there's a crew of people who are deeply ensconced in the NBA, live there, care about it, it's a chance for us to reconnect on the same thing. They're like in it and freaked out about the health implications of this, right? They're like, it's a big problem, and they're like, thanks for trying again, basically, right? And but to me, I'm like, it's real. Like, it's definitely 100%. I mean, this is where it's like, what's reportable is like, if someone calls me up and tells me like an anonymous thing, like, I can't say on this podcast and be a responsible journalist, right? But there's a lot of that. That's how the whole doping thing happens, right? It's just like someone told someone, I know enough. Like, honestly, the one little example, there's a million more. But Derrick Rose said early in his career at ESPN the magazine that he thought about 50% of the NBA doped. And then, something happened behind the scenes. And then he said that basically, I don't know what I was asked about, and I was confused, and I definitely wouldn't have said that. And it's like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah.
Sounds like Uncle Leo at the bookstore when he's stealing books. I'm confused.
Nevertheless, I do have bulging muscles. Yeah, I don't. So to me, like, if you look for it, there's all kinds of signs, and I don't know. I'm very suspicious of the notion that the NBA is the right body to run the testing.
Oh, well, yes.
Yeah.
So, and, Congress called their testing a joke in 2005. There was a lot of evidence it was no better when the Lance Armstrong's program explained how to beat testing and would to this day Lance Armstrong would never fail an NBA drug test. And then the newest CBA has an incredible new loophole, which blew my mind, which is basically if you're willing to pay fines, you don't have to take a test all summer.
And let's just say I'm a max player making $40 million a year. I mean, and you're gonna get fined for things $25K.
Yeah, I mean, that is a mind-blowing loophole. Literally everyone can afford. I mean, also if you make $40,000 on a 10-day or whatever, you probably have the most at stake. It probably most makes sense for you to dope, right? Yeah, and you're just the guy comes and knocks on your door. I've even interviewed those people on the down low who do the actual testing, and you just don't open the door. And then
you pretend because they can't force their way into your house. You just I'm not home.
Yeah. I mean, one of the loopholes is you can just microdose. I mean, here I'm telling people how to dope, but the Lance Armstrong book, this was their genius doctor figured out the first day they had an EPO. They didn't have an EPO test in cycling or anywhere for a long time. Then they got one. And the day they got it, Michele Ferrari, who's probably the best doping doctor of all time, was like, okay, guys, new deal. How you take however many milligrams, once a week, and then you would fail the test the next day? New deal. Just take a tiny bit before you go to bed. They don't test in the middle of the night, and you will already be able to pass the test by morning. Not that hard.
Not that hard.
There's already the fact that you could dope every day of the year and not fail a test. And now, heaven forbid, you're combining anabolics hanging around in your system longer or whatever. You're doing whatever. You're some more aggressive part of your program. That day, the person knocks on your door, just don't answer it. Well, and even then, there's only 600 tests all summer for the whole league combined.
Right.
There's fuck off. You're not trying to catch anybody.
There's so many ways to beat it. Henry, really quick, because I think there's so much misinformation and people still living in the 1970s, 1980s version of what they think PEDs are. So they assume weightlifting doesn't help you shoot your jump shot better. You can't have big muscles. They assume, no one in the NBA is huge and bulking like that, so they can't be. But there are other ways, like EPO, for instance. Just give people a quick primer on how EPO will make you a better basketball player.
Yeah, the biggest athletic limitation in this sport is recovery, right? Everybody's wrecked from yesterday's game the whole time, and all the drugs help with that. To be totally honest, right?
Yeah.
And even different bodies take them differently, and some people don't like HGH because it makes them feel heavy, and some people love it or whatever, and on and on. Some of them make your eyesight a little better. Some of them, and if we look, when the thing really hit baseball, I think I'm not alone in noticing that a lot of the dudes who were exposed as big time dopers were these pitchers who don't even look bulky, right? They're just dudes who can just hammer the ball more times per week, right? And they weren't all ripped or anything. It's just, it depends how you train. You can take the same anabolics that would make Arnold Schwarzenegger look like Arnold Schwarzenegger and just train not to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you can train to have different outcomes from those drugs, right? So these are mimicking the action of the things that make us athletes, right? And so you just have more of that, right? Yeah. That's effective. I think in the NBA would probably, they testified before Congress in 2005. NBA officials did that. Basically, they thought it wouldn't work in this sport. I actually think it would work in this sport maybe as well as in any sport. It's a very good combination of total exhaustion and peak athleticism. And you think guys don't lift weights? Everybody who lifts weights could benefit from anabolic steroids, like, or testosterone or whatever, right? Like,
let's see. If I have a 7-game NBA Finals series over the course of 2 weeks and I want to play 48 minutes a night.
Yeah, I don't want to, like, the thing I hate about even talking about this is, like, there's a bunch of really great, clean athletes who are struggling through this. And now we have to kind of impugn them because the motherfuckers whose job it is to sort them from the dopers aren't doing their jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
Now,
that's
like,
the
everyone's
point.
got to, like,
yeah,
we got to wonder about
that's
everybody.
The point. Yep. That's the point.
But I encourage everyone, if you haven't, check out that whale of an article
for sure
by Henry. It was so good. Sudden cardiac arrest is a basketball problem, which it is. And check it out. Guys, thank you for joining us on the True Hoop Podcast, a top 3 basketball podcast.
I love that.
That's our new tagline. All right, guys. We will see you later on in the week.